Steve and Meade again, back another Bullseye Guy podcast. Super excited. We've had some great guests, including many of which that our guest today knows personally, Bill Reichard. You know, we've had some great guys, but today, the infamous, the famous, the karaoke star, I know he's going to laugh about that one, venture capitalist Tim Draper, coming to us from San Francisco and Silicon Valley. Tim, thanks so much for joining in. Great seeing you as always.
Great seeing you too, Stephen. And karaoke star, you know, it is fun. In addition to singing my own songs like The Risk Master and Bitcoin Hustle, Bitcoin Freedom, I do go to karaoke bars on occasion, particularly when I'm in the Far East. And my go-to songs are Born to Be Wild, which works very well for my voice. And the other one, weirdly, is Can't Help Falling in Love by Elvis. So those are my two big karaoke go-to songs. You have to sing a lot of karaoke with this voice. You have to sing a lot of karaoke to find what your go-to songs are.
Absolutely. And I joke with you every time I see you, let's go. I still have your CD. One of these days I'm going to, oh yeah, I have the CD. Oh, if you have one, you should show it. Let's see.
Was it this one, The Risk Master?
No, I have the one with you on the cover.
Was it this one, Take My Money?
Look how many you have. I'll have to find it. I have one in an actual jewel case, old school.
Oh, wow. Well, you can't use it for much else, so you might as well put it in a jewel case.
Coaster, yeah, I don't think I have a CD player anymore, but as always, you've done an amazing job. I mean, you're historical and legendary within the venture capital and the technology space, and always, you know, ahead of the curve. Let's go a little bit backwards. Talk to me about, you know, or us about how you got involved in technology, what your interest was, sort of what got you started.
Well, it was a long time ago. I was at Stanford and I was studying physics. And I talked to my dad. My dad had been in the venture capital business before.
I love your dad, by the way. Amazing.
Isn't he wonderful? Yeah. Still going, 93, lots of energy. While I was at Stanford, I said, I thought I'd be a physics major. And he said, well, you know, to get a good job in physics, I guess you could go to Bell Labs if you got a PhD or something like that. And he said, but if you go into electrical engineering, everybody is going to want to hire you coming out of school. And so I started to go into electrical engineering, and I didn't particularly like it to start with, but I did love software, and there was no computer science major or any of that, but I did really enjoy getting into software and seeing all the things that could be done with software. So that's where I got my start. And then worked for Hewlett Packard for a couple of years, and then went to Harvard Business School. And when I got out of Harvard Business School, I worked for Alex Brown, the investment bank, in technology for about a year. And then I went off and I said, okay, it's time for me to start my own thing. And I levered up there were a couple of private companies that were set up, and I set up an SBIC and borrowed the private companies that my dad had invested in were worth about $2 million. And I was able to borrow $6 million against that with the SBIC. That was when it was a much more friendly government. Now it's way overregulated. But I set it up with an SBIC, and that SBIC was the money I used to start and build my record. And after about 3 years, it looked like I was going to be out of business. The SBA was calling my loan, and I flew back to the SBA and said, no, hang in there just for a little while longer. And then the IPO window opened up, and Parametric Technology and about 5 other companies went public. And I went from being on the dirt list of the SBIC program to being on their wall as Venture Capitalist of the Year.
Wow.
In maybe 6 months. And then I brought in John Fisher, and we raised a fund. And that was the beginning of what was then Draper Fisher, and then Draper Fisher Jurvetson. And then DFJ, and then I spun back out of the big institution because I think I run better as a solo act, and I restarted as Draper Associates again. So
Yeah,
that's
and the Draper Associates one I'll talk about in a minute, because I think it's a fascinating model that you, again, kind of revolutionized. I don't want to call it a franchise model, but it was almost something unique of leveraging your name. Let's go back to the DF before the J. I met you probably 20 years ago, first time Chicago. Internet was in its heyday. You were, again, there at the forefront, like a few of us were. How did the Jervison thing come about with Steve? Because not everybody knows that story as well.
Oh, he was, we were looking to hire a third partner, and, or a third person. We were still pretty young ourselves. Probably shouldn't have been called partners ourselves at that time. But we founded it, or I founded it, so whatever. So anyway, we saw a whole bunch of resumes, and we saw this one resume, and we said, oh my God, top of his class from Stanford in electrical engineering, top of his class from Stanford Business School, worked at Microsoft and Apple in one summer, and had a patent and something else. I mean, really super bright guy. And when we met him, we realized he was a super nice guy too. And so we hired him to come on with us, and he was a great asset to the team. And we worked together very tightly for probably 20 years.
Yeah.
Something like that before I spun off. I think I spun off about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So probably 2010, 2011, I spun off, but we brought Steve in 1994, something like that.
Yeah, Hotmail. It was back. It was early days. So let's talk about the early days of the internet, because that's going to fast forward us to what I believe is sort of the next revolution of technology advancements with blockchain and Bitcoin and decentralized. Like, Bitcoin's not a technology, but we'll get there. In the early days of the internet, though, Tim, what did you see? What did you think would or would not work? Like, what were some of the surprises in the early days when you were looking at the internet as a whole?
Well, most of the interesting things about the internet were built around AOL. They were all started with Netscape and then AOL, and they had this. They had user control. I don't know why they all gave it up, but they did. And so the internet was really just, can you access it? And then can you put up a website? That was a big deal. And then when people put up websites, they say, hey, go look at my website. And so it was user generated. And then, I made Yahoo their first offer because they figured out that they could search for different things out there in this internet. And then I didn't get the Yahoo deal, but then we ran into these two guys who started Hotmail, and they were doing something else. They were actually helping people build websites, but then they said, hey, we got this other idea, and it was web-based email. And we got pretty excited about it. We didn't know how we were going to make money, but we knew that we wanted email for everybody, and eventually we'd get there. And when they said in their first board meeting, hey, it's up. And I said, what's up? And they said, oh, we're up on the internet, so you can set up your own Hotmail account. And so I set up my own Hotmail account. And then I said, well, how are we going to get the word out? This is great. And they said, oh, we'll put up billboards, TV ads, and whatever. And I'm thinking, we gave you enough money for a postage stamp on a billboard or a nanosecond of airtime. And I said, well, can't we just get it out to all those guys on the internet? And they said, no, that would be spamming. Because there were people on the internet. There were a lot of military and education people on the internet at the time. And they said, no, that would be spamming. And I said, well, wait a second, you're giving this product away. Can't you maybe you can advertise on the product. Can you put a little message at the
Yeah,
bottom
just
of
put an
every
ad in the
email
free email.
that says, P.S. I love you, get your free email at Hotmail? And they looked at me like, God, of the 25 investors we talked to, why did this guy say yes? And then but I kept pounding and pounding, pounding. Finally, they said, okay, we're going to do it, but no P.S. I love you. We'll have a link there. People will be able to click on it and we'll see how it goes. And they did it, and it spread to 11 million users in 18 months. It was just the fastest growing consumer product in history ever. And although it was being given away free. And so some of the other investors were saying, we're just handing dollar bills, we're burning dollar bills on this company. But we knew we were onto something really extraordinary. And eventually Microsoft came and bought it.
Yeah.
And that's
It was
another funny story, but for maybe for another time.
big purchase.
But anyway, that was the beginning of the internet as it is today, where it's viral and it spreads. And so if anybody has any interesting product or story or movie or TikTok or whatever, it will spread around the world very quickly. And that's really because we made it viral. We made the internet viral. And so we're all a part of this internet, and now we're all interconnected. And it's a beautiful thing, and in some ways it gets to be an ugly thing because there's this, whatever is good gets piled on, and then whatever's bad gets piled on. But I think that the internet is one of the best things that has ever happened to the world. It's allowed the world to communicate.
Yeah.
And it's made it so that these geographic borders are less relevant. It's also transformed some industries: the media, communications, information, gaming, entertainment, hotels, taxis. All of those have been completely transformed because of the internet. That has made a big impact on the world.
And we're going to transition to talk about a lot of that. Because same thing, when I started the internet, my first e-com company was March of '96, and we were building our own shopping carts. We were using a merchant account that was technically illegal because you couldn't do internet order processing, and had to convince Visa I was an 800 number, not an internet provider, because Visa thought this will never work. Like,
oh, that's a little like what OpenNode faces when they try to bring, or retailers face when they try to bring OpenNode in and accept Bitcoin. Same thing, where they say, oh, wait, I'm not sure if this is right. Can you do this?
So learning how to be at the front edge of these technologies is always interesting. And I'm going to get to us there, but I want to talk about, after the DFJ, let's talk about the franchise model of Draper Associates, because I think that one was fascinating. David Kremen, Alon, even your son. What was the thought process behind? Because I'm going to use a word, Tim, that didn't exist at the time, but we're going to talk about now. You technically almost decentralized venture capital in a unique way. I knew you'd appreciate that.
So what I thought about was that, hey, Microsoft's in Redmond, Washington, and this Gateway Computer was in South Dakota, and Dell Computer was down in Texas. So all the startups were not in the Silicon Valley. And some of the best ones were starting in other places around the world. And I didn't have enough money or enough, I couldn't hire enough people to cover the world in any way and make sure that we were available to entrepreneurs wherever they may be. So instead, we thought about, well, why don't we build a system, a franchising system where we have venture capitalists all over the world and we're all interconnected. And I thought in terms of it being a hub and spokes, where we'd be the hub and they'd be the spokes. But it turns out then it became a full network where they were node to node. They were all talking to each other and learning from each other, practicing, figuring out best practices, sharing deals, sharing due diligence. A lot of great things were happening. So that network just continued to grow. And we've had a few iterations of it. We continue to evolve it and improve it. And we're about to head into sort of Draper Venture Network 3.0. And you'll have to stay tuned for that, because we're in the process of building something that we think perhaps every venture capitalist in the country, in the world, will want to be a part of this.
Very cool.
Anyway, it's been a great connection, and it allowed us early on through one fund to find Baidu in China and Skype in Estonia, and that has really helped us. It helped us find some really big successes.
There's been some changes, and I joke that there's no such thing anymore as an internet company. In the early days, people were internet companies. Now you're not an internet company. You use the internet as a technology or a tool for whatever sector you're in. That's going to lead to the transition. But before I get there, I don't know if you remember this, 2018, you and I were in Malta. You were on a panel. We were talking about capital, and Abdallah Kablan asked you, oh, what could Malta do to be like Silicon Valley? And you answered it in the way that made sense at that time, that, oh, Silicon Valley's its own, you can't. And you may not recall, I was actually in the audience. I said, well, Silicon Valley, in my opinion, wasn't the center of creative capital. It was capital. The innovators moved to Silicon Valley to get money, and that process has been broken now, not only with something like the DFJ network, but the ability to use technology, especially the new one we're going to start talking about. The traditional systems have been broken. You can get capital using new technologies in anywhere in the world. So those innovation pockets are now, again, we'll use the word decentralized, not in the way we're about to, but in 2018, as you were moving forward, what did you see around, blockchain and Bitcoin and this sort of next iteration of what I call technology? The blockchain to me is not a company, it's the underlying technology, like the internet. What did you see in the early days of that, and what was your primary interest?
Well, it actually turned, I was thinking, well, I've done what I set out to do. I've spread venture capital and entrepreneurship around the world. I was lucky to be a part of the spreading of communications around the world, free communications around the world. And that's allowed free speech around the world. That's allowed a lot of interesting things to happen. My interest was starting to wane. And all of a sudden, I got introduced to Bitcoin. And what's interesting is that in 2004, I met with this guy from Korea, and he told me all about how there's this Korean company or game called Legend or Lineage. And Lineage, apparently half of Korea was playing Lineage. And this guy was so into the game that he hired another guy to be his avatar when he went off to work. And so I thought, wow, this is really interesting. So he wants to win in this life, but he wants to win in this virtual life too. So I started to think virtual money and that kind of thing. He said he was buying his son a virtual sword for $40. And I went, wow. And it turned out that, using real money to buy, or fiat money, we call it now, government money, to buy virtual goods was sort of a wild idea. So that when I first saw Bitcoin, I knew that was going to be something pretty important. I thought virtual currency was going to be game to game to game, and then might end up having some value. Well, all of a sudden Bitcoin came along, and there was a virtual currency that was trusted and open and transparent and global and easy to move. And, it was frictionless. It was amazing.
Yeah. Portable, fractional.
So I jumped right into it, and I bought some, or I thought I had. And then that disappeared in the Mt. Gox fiasco.
Yeah.
And and I thought that was the end of Bitcoin because, you know, if the biggest trader just goes out of business, you think, or takes all the money, I don't know what happened to that money, but somehow it's slowly making its way back. But as soon as I heard that, I thought, oh, too bad. That was kind of a really interesting experiment. But it only dropped the value of Bitcoin about 10%. And so I thought, wow, so people really need this and they don't even care about the trading system. And so I did a deep dive on what people were using it for. And while the press was talking about all the illegal things that were happening, by the way, all those people are getting caught because the blockchain keeps perfect records.
Yeah.
But while the press was talking about all the nefarious things, the really interesting things were happening were remittances, cross-border payments, ease of use, people who were out of the economic world couldn't get credit. Suddenly they had a way of paying for
it's a
things.
democratizing opportunity that's never existed in financial structures.
It opened up the world. Yeah. And then when I met with my friend Sebastian Serrano from Argentina, he said, well, the reason I like Bitcoin is that my parents had built a fortune 3 times in my life and lost it 3 times due to currency manipulation. And he said, so Bitcoin is our savior. It's the way we can all operate. We can operate businesses this way. And he went off and he built this amazing business called Ripio in Argentina and around South America now. But at that time, I realized the lights went off for me and I thought, oh my gosh, that's right. All the current currencies are tied to political forces. And if you have a political force that's not trustworthy, you really can't build your economy because you don't have the confidence to go out and make all these sacrifices that all these entrepreneurs make in order to become successful, only thinking that, you know, any day now the government will come and swipe it from you by just currency manipulation.
Yeah.
And in other countries like Nigeria, the government swipes it from you in other ways. But what's really exciting is that this allows the world, entrepreneurs and startups, to operate on a level playing field, and it allows them to trade in a currency where they know their government can't manipulate it. They have it's open and transparent. Everybody knows what's happened on that blockchain. It keeps a perfect record of debits and credits, and so the accounting is all very straightforward. And so suddenly we've been in effect guided into a trusted economy, a trusted global economy. And that is going to be one of the most exciting things that's ever happened in the history of the world. In fact, I think humans are going to have an anthropological leap where they go from trading shells to trading gold, to trading the promise of gold, to trading the promise of full faith and credit of a government, to now an open, transparent system that everybody has access to, that has to be trusted. And I think that will transform the biggest industries in the world. The internet transformed communications, information, gaming, some very big industries. But the biggest industries in the world, banking, finance, commerce,
communication,
insurance, government, they can all be completely transformed by this amazing new technology that is Bitcoin.
So because
and
you
the
and
blockchain and the smart contract, you put all those 3 together, you have an amazing thing.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say. You and I could wax philosophical just on Bitcoin, but my analogy is Bitcoin is technically, to me, is a form of payment, not necessarily currency. only because if you're a big business, if I pay you $1 million, having a fluctuation is a challenge. And so I think there's some utility that Bitcoin solves amazingly. I think there's other technologies around stable and things that will allow currency and frictionless. So that's going to transition us, because I want to make sure we spend time. Bitcoin's cool. It's like gold. It's one asset. Blockchain enables many other industries, just like the internet. And that's what I try and tell people. I say, don't try and understand blockchain. Look at the internet. The internet disrupted or improved processes in every industry.
Sure.
And this technology is going to do that. And I know you're excited about the concept of decentralized and new systems. Talk to me about where your mind is around blockchain from a standpoint of the technology and what it could change around government, finance, business. There's all kinds of opportunities.
Yeah, first hitting on that volatility issue. Bitcoin, people say Bitcoin's volatile. One Bitcoin is still worth one Bitcoin. It's just against other fiat currencies. It's going to be like the dollars are going to go up and down as they slowly disappear from use. And so you're going to see volatility in all of the other currencies against Bitcoin. And it's sort of, you flip your head a little bit there, and that's, yeah, I believe what's happening. People say, well, when are you going to sell your Bitcoin? And I say, into what?
Never.
Why would I sell Bitcoin, the currency of the future, into the currency?
Especially when you can borrow against it. If you need money, you can borrow against the asset.
Sure, but what? I mean, Bitcoin is money. That's the whole point. And right now, it's hard to use Bitcoin with each retailer because they don't all accept it. But some do. I got a haircut in New York City, and I said, do you take Bitcoin? And they said, yeah. And I went, whoa.
It's like the early days of credit card. You know, not everybody accepted the POS, and they had to run it through on machines. It's still early.
And they use OpenNode. And so what OpenNode does is it's a level 2, which means it's off chain, and then it does all that trading, and it can be faster than the Visa network, and then bring it back on chain for, you know, every day or every week or whatever it needs to be brought back on chain. So OpenNode has sort of nailed that. They use the Lightning Network for this. And so if I'm a retailer, I'm going to take Bitcoin because I don't have to pay the banks 2.5% to 4% every time somebody swipes a card.
Yeah, and I technically, again, I'm pedantic on wording and distinctions, and I like the educational side just like you do. Visa isn't technically faster than Bitcoin. Visa technically authenticates to tell you you're good for it, but the money doesn't hit the retailer. Settlement doesn't occur for 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah. So
people are always like, oh, Bitcoin's slow. I'm like, would you rather have your money in 20 minutes or 24 hours? Like, Visa's authentication, not settlement.
Coinbase works the same way. You can immediately see that your money has moved from one place to another, and then the settlement takes 20 minutes or something.
Yeah, true credit card settlement's 24 to 48 hours.
But then it has to go through its settlement, and that's fine. And actually, I think because of the level 2 work that OpenNode is doing, that settlement will be immediate through.
Yeah. So the financial services. What are some other industries, Tim, that you're excited about in terms of the decentralization of industries?
Yeah. So here's my picture of my view of what the world could be. I love that now we have global currencies. We have Bitcoin can be used anywhere, tried anywhere, spent anywhere. It can be a store of value. It can be spent like a currency. It can be anything. But that decentralized technology can be used for other things. I mean, NFTs are one perfect example where an artist now can sort of think about his art as something that is an ongoing living asset.
Yeah, you can write rules. You can write
Yeah, you
rules
can,
and
right.
attributes around art.
And it works like any smart contract. And so that's sort of step one. Um, Step two is that all of our contracts can be built on smart contracts and software. And eventually, I want to be able to raise a fund, put it all into Bitcoin, invest it all in Bitcoin, have my portfolio companies all pay their employees and suppliers in Bitcoin, and have the whole thing on a smart contract. So my LPs get paid first, and then I get paid, and it goes all the way through the system, and I can keep perfect track of all my portfolio companies and how they're spending their money and how things are going. And I think and we pay our taxes that way, and it would be automated. I mean, if I'm the IRS, I'd be all over this.
Yeah.
I'd say this is the best thing in the world. We don't have to. We don't need the auditor. We don't need the accountant. We don't need the bookkeeper. We're getting the money straight in. So
Yeah.
I think, like El Salvador and many others, Panama, who else is doing this? They're all making Bitcoin a national currency. When they do, they will automate their tax payments. I mean,
Yeah,
this is
Australia's looking at it and has done
magic.
some interesting things. The way they bifurcated Bitcoin as under $1,500, it's just normal payment, and over that, it's a investable asset. And there's some creative solutions coming out.
So I took all this and I started to think, oh, that's interesting. Governance can be done virtually. And it got me starting to think that governments are going to have to compete for us, for the venture capitalist, for the entrepreneur, for the citizen of the world, the business of the world. They're going to all have to compete. So all of those countries competing with one another are going to provide better and better services. And we're going to find that most of those services can be provided virtually. And so all of a sudden, there's this new way of governing that can be virtual and decentralized, so that I could create, in effect, a government 11 miles offshore or up in space. And that government could provide all the healthcare insurance and workman's comp insurance. I mean, most of what government is insurance. And it could provide all that, passports, all that stuff. And it would be the most efficient, effective government in the world. And anyone could be a member of that government. And that is potentially very exciting and really does change things. Now, another thing I want to mention is talking about decentralized world. Unstoppable Domains came to us and they laid out their business. And I said, oh my gosh, this is freedom. This is not just freedom, but free speech for the world. Because what they're doing is they're allowing you to have a domain. You can have a, Steve.crypto or Steve.zil or whatever else they've got. And that domain is decentralized, which means that no government can ever shut that down. So you can say whatever you want. You can, if you want, you can use the 7 words that aren't allowed on radio.
Right.
You can say anything you want. You can put it right there. You can say, free Tibet, or you can say
California should have 6 states.
Or California should have 6 states, or the Syrian leader is a horrible dictator. You can say whatever you want, and that ends up being on the blockchain and cannot be messed with. And so that creates true freedom of speech, truly around the globe. And so suddenly we have a new form of freedom that is opening up our world.
Yeah.
And bad governments, beware, because if you're a bad government, you are going to go with the dinosaurs. Good governments, hey, you're going to be replicated everywhere.
Yeah, and those are the phrases that are coming out whenever there's new industries, and the new terms now are DeFi for decentralized finance and DeSci, which is just decentralized in general. And all it really means, again, when I talk to
And
people,
DGov, I just came up with the DGov thing.
the
DGov,
DGov side is
decentralized government. There's no reason we shouldn't be able to have decentralized government.
Yeah. And blockchain's just the enabling technology that's going to allow these efficiencies, and it's going to do things better than the internet. And that's where I think, the next iteration of what we're coming upon is exciting. And I know you're always leading the field, Tim. Last closing words, anything you want to share, words of wisdom?
I love progress, and I love how humans have evolved. And I've been alive long enough to really see a significant change in the quality of life, the ability to travel, how well we can communicate, how open we are to other cultures, how much we've learned from each other, how much trade we can do around the world. And I think that my message to anybody who'd be listening here is that that we are kind of one world, and we're kind of interconnected, and we need to work with each other. And these geographic borders are artificial and are no longer necessary. And over time, we're going to find that they're less and less relevant to the world. But in the meantime, you're seeing the roar of the dying lion, where China's sort of cutting people off at their borders, and the US was picking a trade war and putting up a wall and all that stuff. I think over time, we're all going to be one world. We're all going to be open, and you're going to see a much happier, healthier world. And I'm really looking forward to it, because it's already starting to come. But for the last year and a half or so, we haven't been able to really travel. But I do know that the world is changing for the better all the way around, and the communication around the world, the trade around the world is great for all of us.
Yeah, it's coming back again. I have so many sayings. Your greatest strength is your greatest weakness. The strength of the internet is communication and access, but it also feeds you the information to reinforce biases. My last joke, Tim, and again, you're one of the pioneers of this, using these new technologies to raise capital and using tokens and decentralize. A lot of the old school guys can't figure out how you can raise money in 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 minutes. And I joke, I say, before the internet, there was no internet. Before the internet, there were no email. There wasn't website.
That's right. It was all personal, one-to-one.
And when you look at the technologies and tool sets now, some of which you've pioneered, you've got community tools and communication tools. There are no more borders. So this new world of community and collaboration is going to be exciting. And again, I know you're at the forefront of it. So I'm excited to see. And Draper 3.0, I want to see what that is.
That's coming. Well, thanks so much, Stephen. Make sure all of your audience buys my book, How to Be the Startup Hero. If they're interested in starting a business, they can go to Draper University. We have a show called Meet the Drapers that allows them to crowdfund, and we just love entrepreneurs, so we're there.
I'll set you up with one of our technology tools called Magmo. It's a little 4-page story with a click that goes to buy your book. I'll set you up with some of those that you can tweet out and share, and we'll drive people to buy for you.
Sounds great. Terrific. Great talking with you, Stephen.
All right. Stephen Meade, the Bullseye Guy. Tune in next week. Thanks so much.